Shabbos, this is Parshas Emor. The Midrash discusses something that's covered very cryptically in the Torah. At the very end of the Parsha, as you know, there was someone who was a Makalel, someone who cursed God, and we don't know much about him. It says that his father was Egyptian and his mother was Israelite, and all we know is it starts with the word Vayetze. He left some sort of state of being. The Mepharshim say he left this world and gave up this world and the next world for cursing God, but the Midrash has only that to sort of deal with. And you could say that Vayetze means he sort of left a state of maybe normal emotionality and went on to something extreme. And the question is, what set him off? Now, of course, the background, as you may know, is very interesting. That the father, this Egyptian, was the person that Moshe Rabbeinu killed when he saw an Egyptian beating up a Jew. And the backstory is that this Egyptian had ordered the Jew to leave his home very early in the morning when it was still dark, and then he slipped in and had relations with the man's wife. And when he came out, the Jew saw that, he understood, and the Egyptian was sort of caught, and that made him more angry, and that's why he was savagely beating the Jew, and that's why Moshe intervened, and he, with Ruach HaKodesh, knew exactly what was going on and was able to see in the future that no ger would come from him, and he knew the twisted nature of, how bad enough that he's beating a Jew, but after assaulting his wife, and so he killed him. So that's a backstory. There's two reasons given. The first answer is that it's about the Parsha of Yuchsin, even though whether you're a Jew or not goes by your mother, what Shevet you're in goes by the father. So he would show up at Shevet Dan, and that's his mother's tribe, and they say, what are you doing here? Your father is not from the Shevet. And he actually appealed to Moshe Rabbeinu. I guess he appealed to the highest court, and perhaps he thought that Moshe Rabbeinu would intervene. After all, Moshe Rabbeinu was so intimately involved in the drama that happened with his biological father, who he killed, and he saved his father, who he grew up with, and his mother. But Moshe did not bend the rules, and Moshe ruled not in his favor, so that set him off. But the other reason given is very interesting. It's because it had to do with the law of the lechem apanim, right? As you know, every month there were 12 loaves of bread that were put on the shulchan, and then the Kohanim would eat the old bread and put on the new one. So the old bread was at least 9 days old, if not older. And he thought this was so illogical. How it's like feeding a king old stale bread. Would that really happen? So he was making fun of this and didn't believe. Ironically, there was of course a miracle where even the old bread stayed piping hot. And in fact, the Gemara in Chagiga says that the Kohanim used to tell the Jewish people, look how much God loves you, look at the miracle that this bread is still piping hot, and it gave them great chizuk, because they only got to the Beit HaMikdash 3 times a year, and this gave them great chizuk. So, but he didn't believe in this, he scoffed at this, and that's what set him off. Now, what does it mean, lechem apanim? So I saw in the name of the Imre Emet, I actually saw it on Aish.com, he gives a beautiful pshat, that lechem apanim is literally the face, and just like water reflects your face, so when you're observing this ritual of lechem apanim, it really depends on where you're coming from. It's sort of it's called the showbread. It really shows who you are. If you're coming from a place where you're already angry at God and scoffing at God, so you're going to look at this and say this makes no sense, and it's going to set you off. You could also say it's sort of like looking at something at face value, just not recognize the miracle, just what it is. Either way, it was something that set him off. So basically, you could say that this is really about someone who has perhaps legitimate trauma, and the question is, at what point do you have to deal with it and control your emotions and not let it get to the stage where you start to judge God, that God is unjust, and therefore you can, God forbid, curse God. So this is where this person failed. One of the interesting things is that the Midrash points out that the word Vayetze also applies to Goliot. Now it's interesting that there's sort of the same scenario of Goliot and this Makalel, because who was the mother of Goliot? Jewish woman, Orpah. You remember that Ruth and Orpah were the two daughter-in-laws of Naomi, and she told them both to go home because she had lost her husband and lost her sons. And what was the point? She was going to go back to Israel and beg for food. So Ruth, of course, did not refuse to leave, but Orpah did go home. She had relations with, some soldiers, and the Midrash says that the result was Goliath. So interestingly, of course, when you think about the fight between David and Goliath, they were actually related, right? Because David came from Ruth, and Goliath came from Orpah. In any case, could you say that there was also a rejection there, that she left, the Jewish home of Naomi, and Goliath somehow was acting out that, and that's why he cursed God? Don't know, but there is a lot of similarities, and it's very interesting. Anyways, I wish you a great Shabbos.